Hello everyone and welcome to the first look. And today we'll take a look at Fosi Audio GR40. This is a DAC with a preamp and a headphone amplifier built into it. And the interesting part is that it uses actual real vacuum tubes for its preamp component, allowing it to power headphones and earphones and have a little bit of the tube flavor. This is very similar to many modern tube setup. But without wasting time, let's unbox this. Then let's try it out to see how it actually sounds like. So I've unpacked everything. You can see here, this is the amp, this is the adapter, the Bluetooth antenna, and two vacuum tubes, followed by a little manual inside. This is the GR40 as I said, and if you actually look inside, these are the specifications. Now let me bring it closer to you to take a look. Now important part is that it outputs around, for 32 ohms, about 250 milliwatts of power. This is actually pretty low for a desktop device. And then, this is its dynamic range. It has a DAC that does 32-bit to 384 kHz DSD256. And then it has Bluetooth 5.1, so you can actually play with Bluetooth. These are the Bluetooth transmission protocols it accepts, 12 volt. And then there is a signal noise ratio of 103 dB, which is actually pretty good. I mean, if you have this kind of noise ratio, maybe you can play with IEMs, which I'll try out later, and a dynamic range of 104 dB. Pretty much this is about it. I mean, this is meant to actually support 32 ohms to 300 ohms of headphone impedance, but they did give a 16 ohm rating. You know what? So much about talking. Let's set all this up and then try it out. So we didn't talk about the tube just now. This is the 5654W tubes. You can see it's written here. Now this looks pretty much an old tube, but I'm not too sure. I'm not an expert in tube, so let's just plug it in and try it out. So plugging these tubes in is actually more challenging than it looks, because it's actually quite deep in and you have to guess on where the pins fall, and the pins are not exactly perfect fitting, so it took me a bit of time. Let me continue trying to plug it in. So I managed to plug both the tubes in, and the magic to it is actually to unscrew these tube protectors first, so you can get to see a little bit more of the hole and also not so much of the I would say as space upwards that makes it really hard to aim the tube in. Then once you are done with the tube, then you just screw it back in, and so you get the entire amp setup. Now I'm going to plug it in and heat it up, because the instruction here is that please allow 20 seconds for warm up before use, and I read the instructions, they wrote there 15 seconds. Either way, I'll just let it warm up for a good time before we start testing this out. So to power it on, you have to press this button here for about 3 seconds, and then you'll see a light on here. So you can actually see it on now. Now you can switch between the different modes by just pressing on this button here, and to off you just press and hold and you will switch it off again. It's a kind of multi-function, and you can also control volume here. And the knobs wise in front, this is rated as a bass knob and a treble knob with an input for headphones here. Now at the back here, you can see that this is the RCA out, which uses the preamp only, and then you got optical in, Bluetooth in, USB in, and you have something called a coaxial in too. So it is quite, I'll say as good in terms of connectivity considering its size. So anyway, I'll let it heat it up first, and then I'll bring a device in to act as a DAC to this device itself. So for the first test, I will actually just listen to the device itself as it's already heated up for a few seconds. Then I'll actually compare it with the Cayin N3 Ultra. Now this is definitely more expensive, but the whole point is to compare tube to tube and see what's the difference. And both of them, technically this is like a DAC and this one has an internal DAC. So just try it out just to understand really what's the real difference between them. Just to note that this does have less power than even the Cayin N3 Ultra. So I'm very interested to know, really, is there any sound difference or not? First, let's start off with something affordable for comparison's purpose. So I'll be using this earphone here. Now this is the 02 from 7Hz. So it is a N3 IEM. Not the most sensitive or insensitive IEM. So, you know, let's see how it fares on this particular device. So I've heard the initial impression with the 7Hz 02. I'll say as first there is some very low hiss. You can actually hear hiss with this particular earphone, the 02. And then I find that the overall sound signature is really nice. It's warm, it's airy, it's big sounding. However, I do feel like that the bass control isn't that great, but it has a very nice low rumble. So you get that slight low rumble, a bit of a rounded edge to the bass, a bit bloomy there, and then a very nice smooth and airy mids to highs. Very enjoyable sound, really. Now that is of course with the 02. Now let's go for something more insensitive for IEMs, and then I'll go for headphones. So I just went ahead and tried out with both of these devices. Now this is of course the DCA Stealth, and then this is the Solo from Audio 64 or 64 Audio. I tried both of these devices on this particular GR40 itself. Now there are a few things I noticed. Firstly, in all these kind of devices where it requires a lot more power, the low hum goes away. There is no hum for both the 64 Audio Solo here and of course the DCA Stealth. No hum. In terms of the response itself, I feel like that they are airy up top, but their soundstage doesn't feel as wide as the devices could go. Especially for DCA Stealth. For the Solo, it feels still okay, still very airy and relatively large and smooth. But for the DCA Stealth, it just doesn't feel as big as it should be. A little bit of a, I don't know, loss of power somewhere. Maybe that's where the power rating comes in. And then also for the bass, I don't feel like that the bass is very punchy. It feels a little bit more rounded than it should be, but the overall low rumbles are pretty nice. Now there is one thing I did note is that this guy has ground hum. Now it's nothing to do with the device likely, it's everything to do with my apartment's power supply. But you know, if you get a better switching power supply, normally that solves it a little bit more. But currently there is some ground hum, and why did I know? It's because if I touch the chassis, I can actually get the hum to go away. But if I don't touch the chassis, the hum comes back in. It's kind of irritating, but for this testing, I'll just let it be. Now, of course, just now I was just listening it alone. Now I will actually compare the sound quality between these and straight away with the Cayin directly first. So for this test, I will actually use the Solo because I think this gives it the best chance. Firstly, it doesn't have that low hiss. The Cayin doesn't have hiss at all unless you use ultra sensitive earphones, and I'll say as the 02 doesn't hiss on the Cayin. So the Solo doesn't hiss on this and this device, so it's purely just for sound quality comparison. Without wasting time, let me try it out. I had some interesting outcome when comparing this GR40 with the Cayin N3 Ultra. And I just want to say firstly is that if you ask me which I enjoy more, I'll say I enjoy the GR40 more. It's just more relaxing, big, airy, and smooth. That's how I put it. Yet still having that focus in the vocals themselves. But the thing is, the more I compare, then it comes down to what is actually more right. And it's a very interesting thing. What I do feel is that there's some sort of, how do I put it? It's very it's very big, but there's some sort of like slight loss in certain frequency somewhere. I just don't know where. Somewhere in the lower mids, there's some slight, like very, very, very slight nasally type of sound. Very slight. But it really gives that slight amount there. And then it also rounds off the bass itself. The bass just doesn't punch as hard compared to the Cayin. And if you ask me which is a more right sound, or at least what I think is a more right sound based on all the devices I've heard so far, I think the Cayin gives a more right sound. But which is a more enjoyable sound, I really do feel I enjoy the GR40 a little bit more. It's just like big, airy. It's like significantly bigger sounding than the N3 Ultra. So I do think that the GR40 is doing a really good job as a DAC cum tube preamp and a headphone amp. It is definitely doing a better job compared to a device that costs many times its price, even though it's a desktop device, right? Now, that is of course with the Solo itself. Now, I did try having a little bit of fun with my DCA Stealth and actually compare it, not with, of course, the Cayin. I actually tried with the big brother Cayin. This is the C9 II as an amp. I do feel that if you run out of juice, it sounds a little bit thin. So the Stealth on this sounds a little bit thin, a little bit underpowered, as what I said just now. It just doesn't feel as right. And when I run with the C9 II, it is true there is just maybe not enough power to run it, or maybe the signature just doesn't match the DCA Stealth very well. But, at least for the Solo itself, I do think that it sounds better on GR40 than the N3 Ultra. But that being said again, which do I feel is a more right sound? I still give it to the N3 Ultra for the more right sound itself. But for the enjoyable fun sound, I give it to the GR40. With everything said and done, what do I feel about the GR40? Now, as a DAC amp for headphones, I think it does a pretty good job for its price. Now, that being said, I do not have the appropriate headphones to test with it. At least with the DCA Stealth, I think the DCA Stealth just requires too much power. It's probably not good for this device. But with the Solo, as an IEM, it sounds pretty good on it, at least better than the N3 Ultra that costs multiple times its price. So considering that this thing costs like what, 100 plus USD on Amazon today, I think this is pretty good. Overall, I do think that the device, if you are here to just enjoy music, it is a great device. Maybe not for the most accurate sound, but if you want a big, airy sound, this is really good. To end this off, I first want to thank Fosi Audio for providing me this copy of the device. This is provided them to give an honest review of it. And I think, I covered pretty much what I felt about this device. It is really good for not so sensitive IEM, and it will probably do pretty well for headphones that are not so sensitive nor that insensitive. But for the devices that fall out of this range, this may not be the best device. And also, of course, the sound signature is something different and interesting, and maybe something that you can try out. I mean, it doesn't cost too much to try. Pretty good. The only thing that really bothered me throughout this entire review is my ground hum in the house. And I'm not sure whether changing the power supply will do a better job, or putting some sort of a filter in between does a better job. Ground hums are really tricky, and that's something for me to explore in the future. But really, that's about it. This is the first look of the GR40. I want to thank Fosi Audio for providing me this copy, and I will see you guys again next time. Bye bye.